everyone has a supercomputer in their hands by the form of a mobile phone. Young people that are in colleges or universities or whatever, or they're looking to get their first jobs or start their first businesses, I'd say for those people.
So this is a London-based company and making it emerging to all any major core regions that you're targeting. How do you integrate blockchain and use that tech for yourself? Hello and welcome everyone to the Future Blockchain Summit podcast live from Dubai Harbour, where the road goes to future, fintech and innovations. I'm your host Lakshay, live from the Dubai Harbour Future Blockchain Summit, and today we have a leader who is building something that is making solutions for cross-border payments and making the FX and risk management seamless. So first of all, hi Dominic, how are you?
No, I'm very well, thanks, and glad to be here. So thank you very much for inviting me.
It's wonderful to have you here. So Dominic is the co-founder and the chief operating officer at the DKK Partners, right? So how do you manage to first of all make this cross-border payment systems? Especially you started from London, right? So this is a London-based company and making it emerging to all different segments and making it possible to do all the sort of cross-border payments and managing the risk as well. How does it make it happen?
Well, firstly, it does take a little bit. I said a little bit of experience, a little bit of knowledge, but we're blessed in this day and age. When I started my career, the tools that were available, particularly online tools, were not so developed as they are now. I think in any industry, it's a lot easier to be global, to be present, to have some level of setup than it was, say, 10 years ago. At the same time, we've ultimately built a physical as well, a physical sort of presence. So even though, yes, we're based in the UK, I said, look, we're here today. We are in Dubai. We have offices in Dubai. We have other offices in Africa. We have obviously expansion plans to other markets. And so it is still important, to still be, on the ground down in those local markets. I think that's, like I said, very, very important. So I think the way you sort of manage it is, it's a hybrid of both, right? I said you use some of those more developed, like I said, online tools, but at the same time, being on the ground, being in those markets, understanding the local cultures, regulations, how things actually operate, is how you really make any way in the market, and particularly when it comes to mitigating risk, you've got to be there.
Yes.
So we don't do everything just from sitting in the UK. You've got to come and be present, and actually, a lot of my job is doing that. So even before I come to this event, I've been at some of our other offices in Africa. So this is ultimately how we've got to do it.
And your major core regions that you're targeting currently is the Middle East and Africa, right?
Yes, at this point in time. So I think there's two angles to our current target and strategy. I think one, of course, I think the problem we're solving is far more prevalent in emerging markets. That's number one. I think the uptake on the technology is also far more prevalent in emerging markets. So when you're looking at digital assets and the role that they're playing, particularly in terms of stablecoin, that role is a lot more prevalent for me in emerging markets. There's been many studies that prove that, and that's all because, as I said, the traditional banking system is very biased, and also there's a lot of bureaucracy, there's a lot of red tape, compliance, as we say, the broadband of compliance, makes accessing the financial system, a challenge, particularly for a lot of people in emerging markets. So that's why, digital assets, crypto, as I said, I think a real, stronghold. In terms of the UAE and Dubai, it's largely geography and attitude. So, geographically, it feels very much, like I said, center of the earth.
Yes.
Just trying to get to places, whether you're going, west to the US or to Europe, or whether you're going east a little bit further, more into like Middle Asia or to the Far East in terms, I said, we spoke about Korea and things. It's just a lot easier to do the business from somewhere like Dubai. But as when I said about attitude, Dubai is a very sort of forward-thinking, progressive. Let's see how we can do stuff. That doesn't mean it's easy, but the attitude is right. And so I think if you come here, with the right knowledge, expertise, intentions, I think you can get a very sort of good foothold to really launch whatever you're doing. And I still think the world is very global. So I don't really see any business being, just
Region focused.
for a region. Yeah, I think the world is far too global. Competition will always be global, and therefore, again, we're in finance, right? And finance underpins economies, economic progress, etc. And if economic progress and trade is global, we have to be global.
Yes. I mean, finance is like, you cannot border it, you cannot control it into one segment. And as you said, your solution is to be payments for the borderless, right?
Correct.
Across the borders. So, how do you integrate blockchain and use that tech for yourself for the cross borders?
Yeah, no worries. Look, so from our perspective, or at least like I said, the work that we're working on specifically is very highly geared towards stablecoins.
Yes.
And that's mainly because, again, the use case that we're seeing so much is really coming about, as I said, the traditional banking system, what we would ultimately call correspondent banking, which is the only way to move funds from A to B across the world. It is very clunky, very hard to navigate, lacks a lot of transparency, and in many, let's say, cases, it doesn't necessarily perform so efficiently. So the big players, there's always going to be ways to navigate. Their entry and exit points are very different. When you're talking about SMEs, even individuals, as I said, the financial system is very biased.
Yes.
So the way an SME in even Dubai is going to interact with the financial system, it's not like how a tier one multinational 100-year-old company that's registered on stock exchanges is going to access the financial system. Obviously, the part we're playing is largely in transfer of value. That's where we see, at least for us, the biggest use case for digital assets. And so that's why I mentioned stablecoin. It's really just, like I said, we're just going to help people, move money from A to B seamlessly, effectively. And of course, for us, because it's finance, it's got to be safe. So
Yes. That's the core, I think.
Yeah, it's got to be safe.
Yeah. You gotta make it safe. So how do you manage to keep it safe?
Ultimately, you've got to bring, and I think this is where look, my background is in traditional finance, right? Where I'm not a crypto bro. We're not decentralized finance or any of those things. So we see the digital asset space, crypto, as an emerging technology. Technology is just a tool. It's just an enabler. So the first thing is you've got to ask yourself, what is it helping me do? Now, the thing is, with traditional finance, that system's been baked over centuries, not just 10, 20 years, it's over centuries that these lessons are being learned, right? And it doesn't mean that there's not more lessons to learn. So from our sort of take on that is, you want to take all of that learning and then integrate the technology into that learning. It's not, I think, a lot of people want to do the other way around. They want to take the technology and then, create something new. I don't see it as creating something new. A lot of the regulations, best business practices, they're already out there. It doesn't mean that they can't be improved,
Yes.
but they got there over, a lot of evolutionary change. And so I don't think it makes sense to sort of, delete that or put that to the side. I think you need to take those learnings. There's people that have been through a lot more than what we've been through. And like I said, and then use that and then use the technology as a platform to really just accelerate and, like I said, solve the problems, that we're seeing. So for me, I think that's key. Key is keeping the learnings that we already have from the financial system that's already in place, and then just using the technology to be more of an enabler.
And apart from the finance and everything, you do partner with a lot of different NGOs and also for sustainability development goes. You focus on that as well. So how do you manage like both the channels?
Sorry, say that about the sustainability.
Yeah, I mean, you've been partnering with a lot of different institutions like NGOs and corporates,
Yeah.
and making sure each and every segment of the ecosystem is well aligned together. So, what's your thought on that?
I sort of like, we again, I come back to, we've got to use our experience to guide, those organizations in terms of how they're going to interact, with the space. We're learning as well, as I said, I think it's a new space, it's a new technology for everyone. But at the end of the day, look, our business is financial, our business is transferring value, our business is, whether it be payments, receivables, etc. That's our business. Yes, every business has to do these things.
Yes.
But for example, I said, if you're a charity, your expertise is raising money, funding programs, managing the programs, anything that's core to your mission, and so, and that's the same for any business, they have their mission. Our mission is to make those transfers seamless. And yes, there's a new technology that's helping us do that. So for us, we just got to keep, like I said, building on our mission. We've got to see ourselves as experts, which means we've got to put in the time. We've got to be, I don't like using too many phrases, but we've got to try and be ahead of the curve, even if it's just in our understanding. Seeing what's happening, how can we use it? What should we be aware of? Again, in terms of like risks and things, and as I said, and just keep integrating that into, how we're bringing the solutions, like I said, to the clients. So this is, like I said, the role that we're playing, and then it just allows those businesses to focus on their mission, rather than being worried about certain payments or aspects of their, their financial sort of makeup and systems, how are they working, etc. So we want to take that burden off of those organizations and like I say, give them something that they can really sort of rely on so they can just get on with their mission.
And apart from all this, what are your thoughts on CBDCs? I mean, that's a very huge topic.
He's asking. Fine. No. Okay, so CBDCs. Well, firstly, I'll say, just in case there's people that don't know, central bank digital currencies.
Yes.
Well, I'll start with one thing. So, firstly, the biggest comparison between traditional finance and, let's say, DeFi, I'm going to abbreviate it, is in the let's say the technological concept of let's say a single platform that's owned and controlled by one entity, whatever that entity might be. Let's say that entity could be a major financial organization or bank or something, right? So and again, obviously, blockchain is ledgers, right? And so that's like what we call it, like say, centralized ledgers. Then obviously on the other side, you've got decentralized ledgers, which is the blockchain. So, again, it's that whole concept of democratizing. And so whether look, there's positives and negatives about those, but to try and, like I say, get to your point, you see, a central bank is not a democracy.
Yes.
Right. So, you're sort of sitting, I think, in a world where there's a lot of conflict. And that's where I'm really unsure about how look, any central banks can do whatever they want to do. There's already a lot of pilot programs globally for CBDCs. In terms, I said, what will be the use case? Like, what will be the uptake? What will be the purpose of those CBDCs? I think for me is yet to be seen. There's a lot of conspiracy about why, because again, central banks are either government or very linked to government, depending on the country that you're talking about. I just don't think it lends itself too well to the democratization, right? And so, a lot of what's coming onto the blockchain, even stable coins, it's not to say that there's not the nuances of regulated versus non-regulated, but again, it's that whole, they're coming from a place of, as I said, it's democratizing finance, even in our democratizing, as I said, transfer of funds, right? So you're not reliant on that bank saying yes or no, and then that bank saying yes or no. So you're not having to really, go through. Sorry, You're not really having to go through those sort of things, right? And that's the whole point. And so, to then introduce a CBDC where it's going to be government controlled, government owned. Yes, there's values to that because, like traditional fiat currencies or what everyone would know, the money that everybody uses, it's going to operate the same in terms of it's going to be, I say stable because it's going to be backed by the government's debt and things like that. But at the same time, not that I advocate, people being secretive and things like that, but it really does provide a way for those governments to have the most minute detail over every single transaction that is occurring. And I would have a very strong argument that it's not the role of a central bank to govern transactions.
Yes.
Central banks have a role, and for me, that role is very, very clear. That role is more linked, like I said, linked to it's an economical role. It's basically supply and demand of one's currency in order to manage the economy of the country. That is a central bank role. I know some central banks double up as regulators, of course, but ultimately the enforcers of the regulators in every country are commercial banks. So it's the commercial bank's current role to manage the transactions, not the central bank. I just, for an entity that is so far removed from the actual economy, when you think about how the financial industry is structured, right? You've got the central bank at the top, commercial banks, corporates, individuals. That's the pyramid that exists. It will always exist. For the central bank who sits at the top to start playing the role of those that are in the middle when it has no direct interaction with the economy in itself. Again, I just don't see it making, like I said, so much sense. And I just think some of those arguments about bringing or bringing down some of those barriers for, again, in our space, like I said, moving money. I don't really think that's there because the CBDC is about the coin. Yes. The technology is what's the enabler, not the coin, right?
Yes.
I'm not saying the coin doesn't have a role to play, but if we're talking just about the coin, like I said, it comes back to all those arguments that, like I said, I put there before. I don't know why a government would want to, and I'm not saying that they're saying that openly, but I don't know why they'd want to get involved in monitoring and managing and regulating, individual transactions. And again, as I said, for me, I just think it's against the movement.
Yes.
That is happening, which is democratization. In fact, if anything, it's the complete opposite. It's
completely opposite.
It's the 180 to okay, we're going to literally be able to control everything as a single entity.
Yes.
And that, what people don't, it doesn't even exist now. So, and this is what I come back to, right? Technology is an enabler. It's what do you want to enable?
Yes.
And I think that's where a lot of people are struggling with the central bank digital coin is what are you trying to enable by introducing these coins? As I said, you can't argue that it's to facilitate a better or more seamless transfer of funds. And so that's why there's a lot of talk around the control aspect. And one can understand that argument, right? Governments at the end of the day, they're involved in lawmaking, upholding, the society that they govern. And so one would argue there's a strong case that the reason you want to do that is to further imprint your control on one society. And so I think that's why there's a lot of conflict.
There's a lot more to discuss about how exactly those things going to work.
A long time.
So finally, Dominic, one piece of advice, a short, crisp one, what you want to tell somebody who is willing to enter this market or maybe people who want to learn about this market.
I think if I was to say, let's say something for young people that are, maybe in colleges or universities or whatever, or they're looking to get their first jobs or start their first businesses, I'd say for those people, I'm a bit old school. You've got to get out there and do your work, got to get out there and read. I would argue that, again, we're in a day and age where everything's just at your fingertips.
Yes.
When I went to university, it was old school book, library, check.
Yes.
Yeah, this was your access to data. Now, everyone has a supercomputer in their hands by the form of a mobile phone or smartphone. And that smartphone allows you to access a whole plethora of information, whether it be, I'm sure, like I said, this podcast will be available, like I said, that way. We've got AI that's coming up now as well. Even the Googles, etc. of this world, everyone's using some, like I said, level of AI, and so I think it's a great time for those younger people to get in and just get up to speed with what's going on as fast as they possibly can. I think if you're, let's say, already at that stage where you want to be here, you want to be in the industry, you want to make some changes. My advice would be find a niche, pick a problem, a real problem, and then, as I said, through your understanding of the environment, the technologies, things that are out there, really try and, like I said, tackle that problem. I think if anyone that's tackling an actual problem will always find traction. I think sometimes people want to do it the other way around. They want to look at what's new, what's exciting, and then they start trying to find problems that they can solve. I would always advocate for doing it the other way around. Of course, yes, assess what you're good at, what your interests are, because the journey's long. There's no amount of planning that can really replace what you're going to experience. And so I guess on a softer side, I would say, aside from getting out there, doing as much as you can to get information, build up your sort of personal character as well. So, build up your resilience. I think, like I said, some of those softer things, I do think, I think especially in today's day and age, I think you've got to be quite tough.
Yes.
You've got to keep going. We're very connected, but we're also very alone. In this world. So yeah, I think you got to get tough, and I think that helps when you're focused. So that would be my
Superbly great insights, and thank you.
All right, thanks so much.